unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome. It's the first moments of The Last Show. The show where every show's The Last Show, because that's the name of the show. I keep saying that. I mean, there's going to be a show tomorrow. This isn't the last of The Last Show, but it is. Never mind. What a great program we have tonight. A quick update from my cat. We did some cleaning today. It involved a vacuum. He's upset. There, that's the update. Tonight, we'll cover an amazing science story. You know, they say you can't polish a number 2. But can you clone one? That's right, we get to talk about poop, and because it's science, it's not inappropriate. Scientists have found a way to take animal dung and use it to maybe save endangered species. Is this a Jurassic Park type situation? But instead of extracting DNA from amber, it's from animal droppings? Maybe. Who'd have thought? Conservation, saving the planet, and poop. It's my kind of story, and we'll talk to a professor who's doing this great work. That's in 10 minutes. Afterward, Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Our weekly mental health segment, the only mental health segment in all of media intended for Thursdays that airs on Wednesday nights. Tonight's topic, we'll get a little serious. Loneliness. Have you ever felt lonely, even when you're in a room full of people? It's not just about being physically alone. It's about feeling that way. Feeling unseen, unheard, disconnected. It's more about something in you. And we'll talk through it, and we'll have tips you need to either address loneliness in yourself or help others you see suffering. That'll be kind of a theme throughout the night. Loneliness. And we'll be here together to work through it and keep each other company. We'll have various guests and things that are uplifting, and you're going to love the show. Let's jump in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
In air travel news, an industry where things seem to be going from bad to worse, I have a comforting story for you. We are all going to fly a little safer knowing that a British Airways pilot is back in the skies after being fired for snorting drugs off of a woman's chest before a flight. Yes, you heard that correctly. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Maybe he was just following the strict airline protocol. Always test the plane's sugar before serving it in coffee to any customers. Now, despite me making up that protocol, this wasn't an emergency sugar packet situation. This was a captain who in 2023 went on a little South African flying adventure before he was scheduled to pilot a flight back to London. And that little adventure included partying, drinking, and what experts in bad decisions are calling a groundbreaking experiment in poor life choices. At some point in the night, he lost his shirt, found some cocaine, and as one does, debated whose chest would make a better serving platter. His own or an unidentified female companion. The next morning, the captain, feeling a little more fasten your seatbelt than upright and locked, casually, and by casually I mean inappropriately, texted a flight attendant friend about the whole ordeal, confessing, quote, "I've been a very naughty boy," which I assume is British for "I'm about to lose my job, my dignity, and possibly my pilot's license." British Airways, to their credit, promptly drug tested him, then fired him. Presumably after explaining they like their pilots high in the air, not high on the way there. See what I just did? Yeah. I'm basking in the glory of that one for a second. High in the air, not high on the way there. All right. He was fired. Because, of course he was. Now, the canceled flight because of the pilot's bad behavior cost the company a whopping £93,000, which, based on what most people are paying for plane tickets today, probably got passed directly on to consumers as a "oops, our pilot did cocaine" surcharge. But wait, here's where the story gets heartwarming, if a little worrisome. The skies are forgiving because the captain is now back in the air, although he's flying for European cargo. Maybe in a job that was created special for him because, well, he's been politely exiled from the rest of the UK. I think they want to keep him away from the passengers. Now, the flying company European Cargo assures the public that all their pilots meet Civil Aviation Authority standards. which, given recent history of planes flipping around and falling out of the sky and a certain airplane manufacturer starting with B shipping questionable aircraft, the Civil Aviation Authority standards seem like they're pretty flexible to me. One aviation expert told the press, "It's disgusting that he was allowed to fly the planes again." I don't know why I chose that accent, but we're going with it. Which, disgusting? I don't know. This is an industry that serves microwaved fish over 30,000 feet. I would have chosen the word appalling. And look, I am all for second chances. But this is not a barista who got fired for sneaking a free latte. This is a guy who lost some shirt, found some drugs, casually debated what part of a woman's anatomy to snort those drugs from, bragged about it to a coworker, had an intercontinental flight canceled because of him, and then got fired. And for that set of circumstances, I don't know if you agree with this, but I'd say maybe some people should just stay grounded. Also in the UK, in important international gold toilet news, 2 men have been found guilty of stealing a £4.8 million solid gold toilet from a castle in England. That's right, this was a heist where the getaway car wasn't just carrying stolen goods, but the lingering essence of bad meal decisions, like liver or foie gras or something. Maybe cabbage. The toilet, a fully functional art piece titled America, was created by an Italian artist as a statement on wealth, excess, living too lavishly, and I guess the risks of leaving expensive plumbing unattended. The golden toilet was installed in a castle which was also Winston Churchill's birthplace. Because if there's one thing the man who saved Britain from the Germans deserved, it was a golden throne. And it was not just stolen by 1, but 3 guys with sledgehammers and a Volkswagen Golf. The mastermind visited the palace twice before the heist, but claimed he wasn't casing the joint. You know, he was just taking in the culture. And by culture, I mean the day before the heist, he was found relieving himself on the £4.8 million toilet. When asked what using the toilet was like, he simply said, "Splendid." Now I for one admire a man who can commit to comedy and crime. The toilet was stolen in the dead of night in September 2019. The thieves broke in, ripped it from its plumbing, and in a moment of blinding slapstick brilliance, rolled it across the floor before shoving it in the hatchback vehicle. That's right, somewhere out there, there's security footage of grown men awkwardly pushing a stolen golden toilet across a UNESCO World Heritage Site at 4:50 in the morning. I need this footage. We need this footage. The world needs this footage. Anyway, since the toilet was connected to plumbing, because toilet, its haphazard removal caused massive flooding in the 18th century castle. Which means these guys didn't just steal art, they also racked up a seriously embarrassing water bill. Imagine explaining that one. No, the water damage isn't from a storm, it's from the idiots who stole the golden toilet. Once stolen, the throne was allegedly melted down and sold into pieces. I'm imagining the YouTube video now. You won't believe the 10 ways in which I turned my toilet into gold bars. Now, the men who were on trial for the theft have now been found guilty. But the biggest mystery remains unsolved. Who got the ultimate flex of taking the final, historic number 2 in America, the golden toilet, before it was ripped from its royal plumbing and melted down? The artist of the piece originally hoped that the theft was a prank, saying, "Who's so stupid to steal a toilet?" Which is a fair question, unless the toilet's gold. But I think the real lesson here is if you're going to steal something worth millions, maybe don't steal the one thing that's been touched by 1,000 butts. And finally, as a warning to any future criminals, if you are going to steal a golden toilet, and I'm not saying you should, try not to get caught. Otherwise, the only throne you'll be sitting on is the one in your prison cell. Coming up on the other side of the break, you'll be excited to dive into the science of the poo zoo, how scientists are using dung to save endangered species. It's my kind of topic. One half fun, one half inappropriate, and one half educational. Wait, is that too many halves?
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. love, science, and the most outrageous news. It's all here. The Last Show with David Cooper.
They say you can't polish a poop, but can you clone one? Scientists have found a way to use animal, dung to help save endangered species. If this works, conservation might involve a little more scooping than we ever imagined. I'm here with someone who's worked on that. Her name is Professor Suzannah Williams. She humorously styles herself as the Professor of Ovaries. She works at Oxford University. Suzannah, oh my goodness, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I'm really pleased to be here. Excited to talk about the work we're doing.
I am imagining a bunch of scientists in a lab having a conversation, thinking about using animal poop to help save endangered species. Honestly, this sounds almost unbelievable. Where does this idea even come from?
Well, it came out of a fortuitous conversation where the wonderful lady called Ashley Hutchinson from Revive and Restore, which is a funding body in the States, and we had a workshop on stem cells a couple of years back, and we got chatting. And she came to me one day, we were talking about what we could do to work on endangered species and conservation. And she said, I've had this idea. It's called the poo zoo. And I said, you what? And I said, go on, talk to me. And she went, well, we could, maybe, is it possible, collect cells from poo? And I went, it's brilliant. I want to do it. Can I do this project? So we worked together and basically created a project, the original concept was her idea, but we've worked as a team since. And I've developed the project and we're working on it and leading it at Oxford.
I got to go to Jurassic Park where they play with cloning and a disaster happens. And somebody says in the movie, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Do you think this quote applies here?
Definitely not.
Good.
Because I'm not in Jurassic Park.
Fair enough. Okay, so how does it all work? How do you take poop and turn it into something useful for conservation?
So basically, this is under a concept so we started using mice. So there has actually been published research where they collected cells from mouse poop. So if you think about it, you've got this poop that goes through the gut and it comes out the other end. And while it goes through the gut, it's basically collecting cells from the side of the gut. So when it gets pooped out, you have the poop, but it also has cells from the animal, right?
Right.
So that was the original premise that existed in mice. And it was and it's been shown. One group research ages ago. And it was could we do this for more interesting species? Because then you've got the perfect non-invasive sampling technique for animals that you don't want to anesthetize. I mean, do you want me to walk up to a tiger and go, excuse me, Mr. Tiger, can I have a bit of your ear to have a look at it? Can I have a bit of your skin? They're not going to say yes. So if we could collect it non-invasively, how cool would that be?
It would be extremely cool. You wouldn't have to shoot them with tranquilizer darts or harm them or interfere with them. And for some animals that are extremely endangered, that's a good thing, not bothering them.
Exactly. So for example, if you need to get samples from elephants, so that's what we've been working on recently, all of the elephants in Africa, you're not exactly going to walk up to them and get a bit. It's just not feasible without tranquilizers, helicopters, darts, money, expense, and a lot of anxiety for the animals.
Walk me through how ventilation works in this poo zoo, because I assume it smells not amazing.
So you've got the wrong idea, mate. You really do. So basically, it's a case of we work in a lab, and actually the samples that come into the lab are clean cells. So we have a staging post. So we've got a collaboration with Chester Zoo, which is a brilliant zoo in the UK. They do amazing research, absolutely game-changing people. And the lady I work with there is a lady called Dr. Sue Walker. And there's a lady who I now know called Rhiannon Bolton, who I met, and she now is a part of my team. And she is the one that goes into Chester Zoo and liaises with the wonderful staff at Chester Zoo and arranges to be able to get poo samples. So in the lab at Chester Zoo, she does get handed literally the dung. There you go, have some poop. And so with the poop, then she works with that to try and get some cells. And then she purifies them, isolates them, and then that's what gets shipped to Oxford, clean samples of cells.
And how does this help us with conservation, having a bank of animals' DNA or genetic material? How can this help us in the future with conservation?
So there's three possibilities that we can use these cells for that we can think of at the moment, and there's probably more in the future. The first one is a really simple genetic analysis. So being able to analyze the genetics of an individual is really quite important. So for example, you don't want to breed brothers and sisters, or you don't want to breed aunties and uncles. You want to know that they're genetically very different. So if you want to know their genetics, you need to analyze their genetics to be able to go, right, you two would be great to breed together to increase genetic diversity. And we want good genetic diversity because it makes individuals really robust and they're very good at preventing getting diseases and infections because they're really robust in their genetics. They're not this tiny little pool. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, I don't know if you've heard of cloning.
I have. The sheep, I've heard of it. Dolly, was it? I was around in the 90s.
Dolly. So in the more recent years, there's been Revive and Restore, again, the guys that have funded this project, they've been involved in cloning the black-footed ferret, which is a highly endangered animal in the States. And what they did was they took cells out of the freezer. And what you do is you basically have the egg from one ferret, so an egg that's about to get fertilized, and you can take the nucleus out of that. So you remove the DNA, and then from your cells, your donor cells, you can take the DNA from that and stick it in the egg. So effectively, you're swapping the DNA into the egg for the one that you want to make. And that's one way of making clones. So that's something we could do if we had these cells that were in a bank. So we'd be able to take those cells and make clones. That's one option. The third one is super cool, highly technical, and not always possible. So the other one is the fact that, did you know that in mice, in a Japanese lab, they've created this technology where you can take cells from the skin of a mouse, you can make them into stem cells, then you can make them into eggs and sperm, and then you can fertilize and get new babies.
So you can take just a DNA sample and then create a baby from it?
Not DNA sample, a cell sample.
Got it.
Got it? It has to be a live cell, but a live cell, and they were able to transform it and de-differentiate it into making eggs and sperm, which become live offspring.
Wow.
So you can make a new individual from that. Now that's super cool.
Suzannah, somehow you've taken collecting animal dung and making a poo zoo from it and tucked in something of high interest and high educational value. That truly is a skill, and I'm with you. Let's keep going.
Excellent. I'm loving this. So basically what they've done is the Japanese group is now working on trying to do this same technique that they've done in mice into rhino. It's proving quite challenging, but they're working on it and they're making really good progress. So if we then are able to isolate these samples, we then have this potential ability in the future when they can work out that technology for other species as well.
But we got to have the bank of it, and that's what you guys are doing.
So far we've successfully isolated mouse cells, and we've also successfully isolated elephant cells.
I love this. It is making me have to go to the bathroom, but I love this. Are there any challenges of getting, animals that are hard to find their dung samples? Is the goal to do this around the world, or are we just doing this in a limited capacity right now?
No, I see a really, really practical use for this. So, for example, at the moment, there are breeding programs of elephants. And what they want to do is increase the genetic diversity of elephants in captivity. So what they've been doing is going to Africa, anesthetizing male elephants, collecting semen samples ready to be banked for use in captive breeding programs. Now, if you were able to sample the dung and get the cells from each of those elephants, you could be really, really targeted and go, hang on, that's the elephant we want. Not have the 10 that we can see. We can only target one. So you could actually do this analysis in advance, which would make it more efficient, know who you want to do, get the samples you want, boom, bash, job done. We're actually doing real cool translational science in the field.
So it's less invasive and you can collect samples from way more individual animals. Who'd have thought poo could be the solution to, extinction of certain animals?
I know. So I think also the other thing that I've got as an idea, which I haven't really spoken about much, is if you think about it, you can also get it from animals which are really elusive. Mm-hmm. So think about snow leopards, right? Not that we've done successfully this, but snow leopards, they only ever capture them on cams, right? Cameras set up there, which they have the catch cams. So for example, if you put those things up, you're never going to get near the animal, but you could literally find where they do their poop because they often do it in the same place as scent marking. So you literally go, hang on, it's done one. So rather than even look for the animal, you could then go and get this fresh sample and do the genetic analysis without actually ever having to be invasive for the species in any which way.
Well, Suzannah, thanks for educating us here. Thanks for having a little fun with me on this topic, and I really appreciate your time.
No, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Professor Suzannah Williams is a professor of ovaries at Oxford University. After the break, Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday, our mental health segment will cover loneliness with things that might help you or a friend when suffering from feeling alone.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. When you're your therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always The Last Show with David Cooper.
Ever felt lonely even in a room full of people? Loneliness isn't just about being alone. It can be something within you. Feeling unseen, unheard, disconnected, internal. Today I'm here with Gary Direnfeld. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday, the only mental health segment intended for Thursdays that airs on Wednesdays. And Gary is going to try to help us bridge that gap between feeling isolated and feeling connected. Gary, welcome in.
Good to be with you again, David. This loneliness thing, it's also about depression.
Sure.
Right? Feeling isolated, no one to talk to, kind of lost. Loneliness it's almost an existential crisis. Who am I? Where am I? And where do I fit in?
Yeah. I can be in a room full of people and maybe I'm the one who knows everyone in the room. It's like all two of my groups of friends and I'm that connecting thread. I mean, not that this happens often because I have no friends, but I can still feel lonely. I can be in bed next to my partner. We just had a nice evening. Maybe we did some adult activities. Ostensibly things should be great, but I could feel lonely in bed, you know?
Yeah. And listen, you can be like me. I can be quite gregarious, quite out there. Put me in a room full of people. I like to sit at the edge and just kind of be more by myself. That surprises people because I am typically kind of out there, loud, maybe even obnoxious. And I don't know that for me it's loneliness, but I want to be at the edge and not in the crowd. And so some people feel that way. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It is.
No, it's a normal part of human existence to feel lonely at times. I think it's just when you don't have the tools or you feel like you're overwhelmed by it, or B, it's happening all the time.
Yes. And the concern is if you're feeling lonely and pining about it and you're not comfortable with that, then we do worry about a profound sadness. We do worry about more depression. We worry about what are a person's thoughts when they are feeling lonely, that disconnection. And so for some people, we want them to speak to their doctor about it, that it's not just something to be sloughed off and to be taken lightheartedly.
It's not something to bear the weight of alone.
There you go.
And I think that's a part of what I want to talk about, and that happens to people for a variety of reasons. One of which kind of, it's weird because when I talk about being lonely, and I do get into fits of extreme loneliness, I can talk about it with friends. I can talk about it with my therapist. I can talk about it on the air. Like the other night, my girlfriend was out with friends and I was at home alone and I was underslept and I just started getting that awful feeling of anxiety in my chest. There's no one. And when I'm in those moments, I'm really like embarrassed. I want to be not seen, even though I'm desperate to be seen, if that makes sense. Like I can talk about my loneliness when I'm not feeling lonely, but when I'm in that moment, I get very embarrassed and I feel like I'm a burden.
Well, for some, that loneliness is tied to a sense of poor self-worth. That I don't necessarily feel worthy, good about myself. I don't want to reach out. Just like you were saying, there can be a sense of either shame or embarrassment about it. And that's exactly when we want people to reach out. That's exactly when we want people to be authentic, be transparent, speak their pain. I'll repeat that line, speak that pain.
And when you do reach out, and because I have done it when I've been really in a pit of despair, I'm divorce Gary, I have clinical depression. I'm doing well now, but in the past I haven't. I'm also a sober alcoholic, so you add alcohol to the mix back when I was drinking. I'm too embarrassed to reach out. But when I do, the vibe, and I once had a friend say to me, let me decide whether you're a burden. Like, you're taking away my agency as someone who loves you.
Oh, good line. Let me decide if you're being a burden. And you know what? God bless that friend of yours, because that was a great thing to tell you.
Yeah.
And you know, I had similar conversations with my mother before she passed, that, you know, she doesn't want to burden us. And it's like, that's for us to decide where that line is, not you.
It's kind of taking the agency away from your friend.
Yes.
And you're kind of forcing a negative view of you on your friend. And it's a bit unfair. I know it doesn't feel unfair when you're lonely. I know it feels very real. Like, I don't want to bother these people. They don't have time for me.
Yeah.
But let them decide, you know, let the friends decide whether they can hear about your loneliness, whether they can hear about the stuff you're going through. Because in all likelihood, even if it is heavy stuff, your friends are there for that. Isn't that what friends are for?
Yeah. And I'm just sitting back and letting you talk, David, because I think you're giving very sound advice, very sound guidance to the folks listening to us this evening. And that is what we need to do. So the degree to which you can overcome that, and, you know, this loneliness, and I think today, you know, politically today, there are many more people feeling isolated and lonely, scared, not knowing what to do. And we want all of them to just acknowledge it. There is something so freeing by owning your own despair and being not public, but being open with a few select people with whom you have some safety and trust.
So you're saying I shouldn't talk about my life on the radio? Noted. No. Yeah, but back on this topic of like embarrassment, why do you think people feel shame in admitting it in the moment, or admitting it not in the moment, that they're suffering alone?
That's an easy one. We are inundated with messages that we should all be living the high life, that we should all be having fun, excitement, and in large groups of people partying. I mean, look at any social media. People are forever posting their unrealistic best version of themselves. So the messages are there. And if you're not a part of that group, that community, there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
You know, you turn on the news, you feel polarized, like you might identify with one political party or one type of view, and the other view's out to get you. You turn on social media, everyone you see is living this perfect life that you may not. Yeah, it comes at us from every angle.
Absolutely. And, you know, of course, that can add to that sense of loneliness. We want people to be mindful of that. So if you're scrolling through your social media and you're inundated with your friends' posts and they're all leading this high life, either get off the social media or just don't believe it. You know, I follow some people who are experiencing mental health problems, mental illness, and they're so brave from my perspective because they are posting things about their journey and the difficulties they come across. And it's so real, it's so raw, and I just think it's so helpful.
We're here with Gary Direnfeld, a therapist, a social worker. We are enjoying Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. When we come back, we'll talk the unusual, strange, funny ways that people might cure their loneliness with or attempt to relieve it. And we'll also talk unexpected causes of loneliness, times in life when you wouldn't expect it, where it can come. Call or text us if you have something to add to this conversation. The number is 1-888-505-6644, which I'm sure the raspy-voiced lady will tell you in just a minute. Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday, coming back with loneliness next.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Gary Direnfeld is here, a therapist, a social worker, a family marital counselor person. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. How's that for a title, Gary?
All around nice guy. How's that?
Yeah, I feel like whatever I say about you, you can put on your resume because it's been said. We are talking about loneliness, and I want to talk about a cartoon. It's called BoJack Horseman. It stars Will Arnett as a horse. It's a comedy. It's about a celebrity horse who's sort of a has-been, and he struggles with depression and drug addiction and broken relationships and bad behavior and repairing those relationships. And I know it's a cartoon, but I'm not the only one who thinks this. It's one of the most profound explorations of loneliness I've ever seen.
Well, I'm going to have to look for this because I've never heard of it before. Thanks.
It's also extremely funny. And Amy Sedaris, the comedian's in it. I love her with all my heart. It's a great show. Anyway.
Hang on. Throw the name back out.
BoJack Horseman. And I do not work for Netflix, although, hey, if they're looking to, sponsor me, why not? But this is unpaid advertising. Anyway, there's a scene, I don't quite remember what happened, but one character kind of achieves their goals. And I want to talk about unexpected causes of loneliness or unexpected times in our life when we can feel lonely. This character achieves all their goals. Like they got the TV show deal, they got the movie deal. These are actors in Los Angeles. I mean, they're animals, they're horses, but
okay.
And they're not feeling quite right about it. There's this profound emptiness in that moment. And one character says, every happy ending has the day after the happy ending, which is such a profound statement. Sometimes in life, we can work towards successes, goals. Maybe it's that promotion. Maybe it's that relationship. Maybe it's earning that much money. Maybe it's getting the medal.
We find meaning in the pursuit of things, not the acquisition, in the pursuit. Because once we acquire it, then we're left with, then what?
I'm not saying all accomplishments can leave us feeling lonely. I think it's quite the opposite.
No, that's fair.
99 or 90% of people's great accomplishments make them feel proud and have a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment and all that. But there is that fraction of like, oh, I got that piece of paper, or I got that medal, or I got that title.
Well, you absolutely remind me of when I got my master's in social work 100 years ago. Because for 2 years of my life, I'm immersed in school education, the next assignment. You get, just like you said, you get that piece of paper and then it's, oh my goodness, where am I? Who am I?
What am I? Who's around? What's next? And that every happy ending has the day after the happy ending. In movies, we see these characters, and in TV, we see these characters work towards a happy ending, and then it ends.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, they got to wake up the next day, and that can be a time where people feel lonely.
Yeah, I watch these rom-coms, and just like you're saying, they all have this marvelous happy ending, and then I it's the marital therapist in me. I'm wondering how they're doing next week. Literally next week. Have the wheels on the bus, gone wobbly. But yeah, so in those moments, again, we can feel lonely. We can feel a sense of where am I now? And how dare I almost feel this way? I don't want to admit it after this accomplishment. And so again, this can be very isolating, and that isolation creates that sense of loneliness. I'm disconnected yet again. Reach out.
Yeah.
I know you, David. I know that you are the friend who will be up to all hours of the night should a friend reach out to you.
Yes.
You're that person. And I implore people, be that person. Be the person you would want someone to be for you.
I like to think of this show as a way, it's kind of a canvas for me. Maybe it's going to sound selfish, I don't know. But I'm kind of like working my stuff out on the air and connecting with the people I interview and connecting with the people listening. In some sense, I'm like connecting with myself too. And I don't feel lonely when I'm performing. And perhaps the whole reason I'm sitting here is from like a kind of a deeper level of loneliness and the work and the creative engagement makes me feel connected to people. After all, that's what I think this show is. That's what I want this show to be. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but people have unusual, creative, sometimes funny ways to cure their loneliness. And some people, I've read an article, a woman kind of fell in love with ChatGPT, and she's talking about, she knows it's a bot. She knows she's chatting with an AI, but it helps her with her loneliness. I'm not saying people should do that, but I'm saying there are unusual ways in which people get connection. And for me, this show may well be one of them.
There was a young man who sat in the concentration camps, Nazi Germany.
Whoa, Gary, you just got super heavy there. I like it.
I know. And he wrote a book that's quite famous. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. The author is the wonderful Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist. And what he found was that those persons who found meaning even in their suffering tended to survive the concentration camps better, and were more likely to live through that. And I think that's true of all of us. We are forever on a search for meaning. You find meaning through your work, through this talk show. I find meaning in being your guest. This gives us purpose. This defeats the loneliness, coming full circle. So if you're feeling that loneliness, you also have to, in a sense, find yourself, find your purpose, do something that gives you pleasure. And so we tell people, get a friend, talk to people. Yeah. But if you engage in activities that are pleasurable to you, one of the side effects, positive, is finding people.
My girlfriend Miranda is in book clubs. She's in a record club. She is in her friends. They call it dinner club. And I'm like, it's just a bunch of friends going out to dinner at a restaurant once a month. Why does it have to be a club? I don't understand. But I'm a cynic, and sometimes I tease, but it really does help these young professionals. My girlfriend has a real job. She's not like me. These young professionals who are busy and have lives and husbands and wives and kids and pets and things going on. Life goes on. It's this carved out time several times a month, depending on the club, where they make meaning. And I think it's really nice. And I've gone to one or two, and I'm kind of jealous. Maybe I should go to more.
There you go. Not just we adults. When our son was 5, we moved houses and cities, actually. A couple of weeks after the move, he's being persnickety at the dinner table. I asked him to go wait in his room, come on back out, still persnickety. We did that 2 or 3 times. And finally I said, son, I have no clue what's going on for you. This is not you. This is not your normal behavior. What is going on? He breaks down into tears and says, I miss my friends. Oh, God, the social worker and father in me totally missed it. He was lonely.
Yeah.
He was lonely. So, I want listeners to know that although we're likely looking at this conversation through the lens of adults, it affects our kids as well. And bullying can make a kid feel isolated and lonely. Anxiety can make a kid feel isolated and lonely. But kids, it typically comes out through mood and behavior. And so the challenge is getting underneath that mood and behavior, not just as I did in the moment, stick to the surface, but figure out what the heck's going on. And then, look, whatever the solution is, it could be different according to the circumstance. But get your kid connected.
To tie a bow on it, this search for meaning, like, to me, the meaning of life is to go on that journey where you're searching for meaning,
It's the pursuit.
So don't feel like you need to know what your activity is, what your hobby is, what that pursuit is. Just try a bunch of stuff. I mean, that can help. I don't know. That's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday with Gary Direnfeld. Gary, thanks for being here.
Thanks, David.
Coming up, someone who's taken solving loneliness into their own hands. You've heard of speed dating, but have you heard of speed friending? I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
The Last Show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
We've all heard of speed dating, but speed friending? Today we're joined by the founder of Friends of Friends. It's a group that facilitates speed friending. We're going to find out what that means, and hopefully it'll help people connect meaningfully in a world that feels disconnected these days. I'm joined by Georgia Huntley. Georgia, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I've used apps for making friends. I've been on Bumble, okay? And I once had a competition on the radio with someone who could make a better friend on Bumble. I guess the short of that is, it was a weird thing that we did. I guess the short of that is, it feels like it's really hard to make friends these days with my job, with my age, with working from home. I'm feeling a little isolated. Maybe you were too before you started Friends of Friends.
Yeah.
I'm highly extroverted, so this was a way for me to make more. But to help people such as yourselves who are working from home, looking for ways to get out there.
So tell me how this all started. What is Friends of Friends?
Yeah. Okay. This all started out of a need for me to do something purposeful. And it was obviously out of COVID. I came to the idea of hosting online conversations, something with a bit more intention, something past the surface. And I created Friends of Friends, the brand. And from there, I actually gave up on it because I was like, I actually don't know what I'm doing here. And then I hosted a clothing swap, kind of just out of the blue, literally. And in person, obviously, it caught the eye of the brewery that I now host my speed friending events. They saw the branding that I was doing in promotions to get as many people through this clothing swap as I could. We ended up having 60 people. We raised a little bit of money. We swapped clothes. They reached out and said, hey, looks like you're getting people together. And we noticed as bar owners, people aren't as social as they used to be. They're really keeping to themselves. We'd like to change that. Would you like to host some sort of conversation style event? I didn't know what to do, but I said yes. So
okay, so you got the impetus. And what does a conversation style event at a bar look like?
Yeah, so it's set up with these large tables. It's a small brewery that I hosted this at mainly, and their tables have different topics. So you enter the space, we do a bit of an icebreaker game, and we did a large one where it was an icebreaker of, what do you call it? Rock, paper, scissors tournament.
Yes, I'm amazing at that game, side note, if you want to play it towards the end.
You get it. Totally. Amazing. So we had 80 people playing rock, paper, scissors tournament. So it was 2 rows. Anyway, it was super fun. And then we move into rounds of conversation. So you sit at a table, that table has a topic. On the table, there's conversation prompts. It's something that's useful, but it's not it's not like you have to sit down and go through the checklist. So it's just there to guide your conversation. And then you do 20 minutes of one round, and then you do that again twice. So you hopefully get up, mix and mingle with different tables, talk on a different topic. And then we have connector cards, and you just fill it in, say, we hit it off. I don't actually facilitate speed dating. That's not my role. The whole point is to work on your social skills. If you find someone that you connect with, follow up with them. And that's just the event, is just to try it out.
And what do some of the individual interactions look like at an event like this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you're sitting in a group of 6, right? So you're talking to a group. So individual interactions, some people are really quiet. There's a mix of introverted and extrovert. You can totally see the people that are the ones facilitating the conversation versus the ones that are listening. But it seems to work. I don't know. I'm coming up on the 30th event. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that question properly.
No, I'm just more interested in what people are walking away from the event with, and how it transforms them, or people who are struggling to make friends. They go to your event and something changes for them.
Yeah, they see that they're not alone. They see that other people are literally in the space with the same idea. It's hard to make friends at a hobby. It's hard to make friends at work where you're there for the sole purpose of producing something versus who am I? And what do I want to represent? And what do I want to talk about? So it's a place where maybe you hear someone talk about something that interests them, and then you go, oh, I might want to try that, or you might not want to try that, but it gives you something to think about, makes the world bigger.
Has anyone who's attended one of your events reached out and told you how you made a great friendship for them or anything like that?
Yeah. So we've had a couple people say that they stayed the night, they closed down the bar, they went bowling over the weekend. There's a group that gets together weekly now. That's a kind of a Friends of Friends group. that goes to trivia every week.
That would be a friends of friends of friends is what that would be right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I get beautiful messages often of people saying that they found someone cool. And I'm like, that's amazing. So,
and how does that make you feel when you just created this thing kind of organically to serve, I guess, your need and what you wanted to do for people in a small way, and then you get these messages?
Yeah, wow. Just, you can't stop it. I'm like, I guess I'm doing this for the rest of my life. Like, I don't know. In some sort of capacity, right? So it's absolutely beautiful.
Are there any unexpected success stories, like people who had terrible social anxiety attended and kind of broke through that?
Yeah, there's people who say that I see them sometimes coming in, checking in, and they're not committed yet. So over time, maybe they go to 2 and they warm up a little bit, and then they go and they stay for the whole event. And then, they'll just say that it took a minute to warm up, but they're really glad that they went. So there's pieces of those, and there's people creating their own book clubs and things like that. So it's really just been a great exercise in what is possible. So
I always rolled my eyes at book clubs and these kinds of things. And then I got invited to a record club through my girlfriend's friends. And I, of course, rolled my eyes because I'm a cynic. But it's a lot of fun. She made a lot of new friends through it. Are there different groups of people that respond differently to these events, like maybe men or women or older folks, younger folks?
So I host events for 20s and 30s and 30s and 40s right now. I have a lot of people in their 60s and 70s saying like, when are you going to do this for us? So I'm working on it. But is there a different reaction from them? No, like not that I can clearly tell. So everyone's just happy to get out and have an opportunity, enter a space where someone's thinking about friendship and you don't have to work so hard to break that ice, you know?
So you're in Guelph. You've got some press about Friends of Friends, Guelph, Ontario, that is. You're looking to bring it to more cities. What challenges would you have doing that? Do you think we'll see Friends of Friends events around the world? For example, I have a buddy who started this like motorcycle meetup in Toronto because he wanted a sort of like non-threatening motorcycle thing.
I know that one.
And now it's like a international movement of like you don't even need a motorcycle. It's like the opposite of the stereotype of the mean biker. How do you see Friends of Friends growing from where you are to kind of an international movement?
I love that you're already asking me the global question because that's super on my path. I don't want to host these events for people. I want people to come and say like, I could do that too. And then I could say, well, this is what worked for me so that they can do it wherever they are. So Friends of Friends Global, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a movement. People are creating curiosity in their day to day, whether it's at my event or on the bus. Like, I just want people to feel more connected and to feel that they can have the confidence to do that. So, yeah.
Do you think you can bring that level of intimacy to anywhere in the world, no matter how that city is?
That's going to be a super challenging. I don't think it's going to be easy. Guelph is particularly welcoming and warm. So that's going to be my challenge, but why not?
Yeah, I'm in New York where people scream at you on the street, but it's friendly. You know, you scream back. It's kind of like a nice, sometimes New Yorkers just yell at each other and people who aren't from here are like, what is happening? And then the people who are yelling at each other are very friendly. It's a strange moment. A favorite thing that has happened at a Friends of Friends meetup? Is there a moment that really you observed that kind of you were struck by?
No one single moment. Just that you can tell when people start to relax and then they start to look people in the eye and they join a group without me like bringing them over. Or the people that like I have an OG group of Friends of Friends people who've come from the beginning, and I guess seeing their confidence grow and then them welcoming in new people to sit down with them. That's probably, I guess, the biggest piece where I'm like, oh, that person was really uncomfortable ahead of this moment. And that was huge growth I just saw. So
I'm here with Georgia Huntley, founder of Friends of Friends. Georgia, where can people find out more about it or maybe get in touch with you if they want to bring it to their hometown?
Yeah, Instagram, joinfriends.offriends. That's where you can find Georgia. That's where you can find me.
Thank you, Georgia. Up next, everyone tells you don't get addicted to scrolling on your phone. But what if I told you social media messes with your brain and rewires it? Don't take my word for it. Take a neuroscientist's word for it. How does this all work? Answers coming up after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Don't let them tell you you have to change.
breaking down today's chaos with tomorrow's headlines. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Everyone tells you don't get addicted to scrolling on your phone, but that's easier said than done. Why are apps so addictive, though? Turns out social media messes with your brain a bit like a slot machine, minus the jackpot, and that's not a good thing. I'm here with a neuroscientist who studies how platforms like TikTok keep us hooked. I am here with Laura Elin Pigott. She's a senior lecturer at London South Bank University in the UK. Laura, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Quite simply, how do social media apps use dopamine to keep us hooked? And also, what is dopamine?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So dopamine is kind of our feel-good chemical that we have in our brain. It's that chemical that's released when you go on a really nice walk and you come back and you feel really great about yourself. And then social media kind of taps into the release of that chemical through the mechanism that we use social media. So that constant scrolling can become addictive. And when something is addictive, then we have an excess release of dopamine inside our brain, along with a couple of other brain chemicals like serotonin and norepinephrine, and those three chemicals, as I tell my students all the time, they're the kind of trifecta of addiction chemicals that we work with whenever we look at any substance that is addictive in the brain.
I am the weirdest problem gambler you have ever met. I've been to a casino maybe 5 times in my life, and when I sat down at a blackjack table or a slot machine, I was in like the most euphoric space I've ever been in. I felt amazing, and I knew from just those experiences I cannot gamble. My brain likes it too much. Do our brains light up in similar ways to gambling when we're scrolling through social media apps?
Yeah, very, very similar ways, and that was some of what our research looked at was there are lots and lots of studies that look at how our brain interacts with social media. And what all of these studies have in common is that the activity that our brain goes through when scrolling through social media is very, very similar to the activity that our brain goes through when we are addicted to, for example, gambling, or when people take drugs or abuse substances. And that kind of, you can narrow that down to specific regions inside the brain, and then how our brain likes to connect itself. And then the better our brain becomes at connecting itself on a specific pathway. So, for example, the more time you spend scrolling on social media, the better your brain becomes at actually wiring itself up to think that scrolling is normal. And then the more it craves, the more dopamine you release in your brain, the more dopamine you want. Does that make sense?
What I'm hearing is that social media changes our brains. Does it really rewire the way we think?
Yeah, it does. So it rewires our reward pathway, which is the pathway that we have in our brain where we have a lot of dopamine release. And we do have a constant reward pathway going on for everything. You know, that's why we get pleasure out of eating, or from sex, or from anything that we do in our life. But what social media does, it intensifies that pathway by creating this additional release of dopamine. And so it makes this pathway a lot stronger. And then in doing so, there's a very specific region in our brain called the nucleus accumbens. And in doing so, it can change what this nucleus accumbens looks like, so the density of it.
Can it make other rewards that we would consider more healthy? Like, let's say, sex, you just mentioned it. I'm a home cook. The satisfaction of knowing that I cooked a good meal.
Yeah.
Does it make these other, what I would say are more healthy rewards, less rewarding?
So the release of dopamine that we see when we use social media is obviously much higher than the release of dopamine that maybe we get when we do an activity that we still really, really enjoy, just because of how social media activates our brain. So you could think of the equivalent of that being where you spend your whole, I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, so you spend your whole life, listening to lots of other artists, but then all of a sudden Taylor Swift comes along and you think, oh my God, this is my type of music. And then your dopamine dance routine becomes full of Taylor Swift. And so that is kind of what it looks like. And so then whenever you listen to any other kind of music that isn't Taylor Swift, then all of a sudden that isn't as effective at releasing dopamine in your brain.
Because of my girlfriend's musical tastes, I know this analogy of Taylor Swift all too well. See what I did there? There's a song called All Too Well. You looked into something called dopamining in your research into the addictiveness of social media apps. What is it? Can you break it down for me?
Yeah, so this was a term that actually my colleagues came up with in our team, who are absolutely amazing. And we kind of started using this term dopamining, in that dopamining is when we feel like we're a bit low for the day and we need to pick ourselves up. And so dopamining is whatever activity you choose to pick yourself up and to kind of give you that dopamine release. Now, unfortunately, many people's dopamining activity is scrolling through social media, and they get that dopamine hit from there. And what we were trying to do at one point in the research is find an alternative dopamining technique that could still then release dopamine in a similar way to how social media does, and in a healthier way.
I don't want to be alarmist. Maybe people are hearing this and thinking, okay, I understand it all. I still want to use social media. But for those who maybe are hearing what you're saying and want to cut down their usage, want to make it less of a dopamine reward, any recommendations or takeaways from your investigations?
Yeah, so one of our we did come up with a dopamine menu that didn't get put in the article that we published, but we kind of loved this dopamine menu, and it consisted of multiple items on it. And you might have seen other versions of dopamine menus going around on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. And you could do any combination of items on the menu. So say, for example, you've got a starter, main, and dessert. And maybe for the starter and the dessert, you have two smaller activities in your day that don't take a lot of time. And then your main for your dopamining activity would be a longer lasting activity. So an example of a main activity could be taking yourself for a nice walk in a park or next to a river. Maybe, getting your heart rate up a little bit, and then that releases that feel-good chemical of dopamine in your brain. And that feel-good dopamine chemical from that type of activity will last a lot longer than the release of dopamine that you get from looking at your phone. And then other smaller activities that you could use as the starter and dessert on your menu of the dopamining day could be, for example, reading your favorite book, where you don't actually have to leave the house to do that, do you? Or maybe it could be making yourself your favorite meal or your favorite dessert. So yeah.
Laura Elin Pigott is a neuroscientist and a senior lecturer at London South Bank University in the UK. Laura, thank you for sharing this research with me. I'm hearing kind of like a more holistic approach, like don't necessarily get off social media completely, but maybe, cut down the use and do activities that would release dopamine that are maybe healthy for you, like taking a walk.
Yeah, exactly. And social media can be a phenomenal tool to engage with your colleagues, to engage with your friends. You can learn loads of things from social media. There, it's a phenomenal tool that we should use, but it should be treated as such, as a tool. And as other tools are kind of regulated and we're careful with their use, we should be careful with our use for social media.
Laura, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
When we come back, more on our loneliness topic. We'll go to one county that just declared loneliness a public health crisis. We'll answer why that's important to a community and what you can do to address loneliness in your community.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. When the day is done, We're just getting started. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Loneliness isn't just a feeling in your head. Loneliness at its worst isn't just mental anguish. It's something that can hurt your health. In Thurston County in Washington, there has been a public health crisis declared for loneliness, and I am here with the person who spearheaded that effort to get loneliness categorized that way, and he's here to tell us all about it. His name is Brian Windrope. He's the executive director at Senior Services for South Sound in Thurston County, Washington. Brian, thank you for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be here, David. Thank you for discussing this topic.
So I'm sure it's not just where you live, but I do want to talk first about where you live. Tell me about how loneliness became such a problem where you're at.
Well, I think to begin with, we all understand that it's not a new problem. What really happened to trigger the action that happened here in Thurston County was that the Surgeon General released a report that highlighted the health impacts of isolation and loneliness. So it went from just being something that we all knew about, right? I mean, we all had aunts and parents and uncles who were lonely back in the day, and we all just thought it was a bummer. You know, that was kind of a bummer that Aunt Margaret was sad and lonely. But now we know, oh my gosh, the Surgeon General pointed out this research that highlights that it's as bad for our health as obesity, smoking, and diabetes, the things we know are not good for our health. And so when we saw that report, it was a light bulb went off saying, my gosh, we know it's happened, we know it's pervasive, and it's bad for health, so we need to do something about it. And that's what started it off.
Out of the many awful things that happened during the pandemic, one decent thing is I think people got more comfortable talking about loneliness as they were holed up in their houses and quarantining and social distancing and all that. Do you think that shift from then, people talking about it more in the 2020s, 2021, helped with your effort now and getting people more aware of this?
That's an interesting idea, David. I haven't thought of it quite in that way, but I suppose I certainly wouldn't argue against that, right? I think that maybe the way to put it was that it was fertile territory, because what has happened was when I first started to reach out to colleagues in the nonprofit community here, and the partners I'd like to highlight are the United Way here in Thurston County, the YMCA in South Sound, and the library system, Timberland Regional Library System. When I spoke to people about this, every single person, them and others, were like, oh yes, oh yes. I never got pushback. No one argued the point. No one said it's not a serious problem, whether they had read the Surgeon General report or not. So then when we went to Thurston County was, the health director said, oh yes, oh yes, this is a problem. We know it's a problem. And it's a problem among all ages. So I'm the executive director of a senior serving organization, but YMCA cares because it affects all ages, and the county cares because it affects all ages. And so it's been easy to talk about, and that might have been partly because we'd experienced heightened loneliness during COVID.
What does it mean for a jurisdiction, in your case a county, but maybe in Canada it could be a province, could be in the US, it could be a whole state, to declare loneliness as a public health crisis? How does that shift things?
That's interesting. Well, what I would say to that, David, is that in the Surgeon General report, it highlights that in a recent survey, only 20% of people surveyed recognized that being isolated and lonely, and by the way, those are different things. You can be isolated and not lonely, lonely and not isolated. We can talk about that if we want, but you need both those words. That only 20% of people surveyed understood that it was bad for their health. So we've been focused on raising awareness in the community. We would love to get our community, Thurston County, and the South Sound of Puget Sound, to where much higher percentages of people understand that is bad for their health. And so the impact of a public health crisis, by the way, the first county in the United States to declare it a public health crisis, giving them a shout out, was San Mateo County in the Bay Area of California, just south of San Francisco. So I was inspired by that and said, hey, if they can do it, let's be the first county in Washington state. And so the impact of it, and it was declared December 10th, 2024 is when the public health crisis was declared by our county. The impact of it most immediately is that it's in the news. People are reading about it. People writing about it in their newsletters. I'm doing your show right now, for example. It's been a podcast by our library system. And so as the time goes forward, if we're able to raise awareness in the community to the level that maybe it reaches 70 or 80%, right? If you walk out on the street and say, hey, whether you do it or not, is smoking good for your health? Like most people are going to say, no, it's not good for you, but do it if you want, right? If we could get people to say, is loneliness impacting your health? To say that, no, it's bad for your health. That would be a powerful, powerful step for here. And I would say for all of us, really around the world, to recognize that it's bad for our health.
Well, I'm glad that we're talking about it. Just how bad is loneliness for our health?
Well, I'm not a physician, but I've read the research that anyone can read. If you look up the U.S. Surgeon General warning, there's another report that I would turn people on to if you're a senior or have parents or grandparents who are seniors. And it was put out by the National Academy of Sciences in 2020. And it is called, you can find it online, it's called Social Isolation and Loneliness in Older Adults. National Academies of Science here in the US. Anyway, that report has a ton of research in it too. And what they all say is that if you identify as lonely, it increases your chance of cognitive disease, dementia, Alzheimer's significantly. It increases your chances of other health impacts that include heart attack, cardiovascular health, and increases your chances of stroke. It's bad. It is bad.
Yeah.
How do you say that? That you're going to die sooner.
I get it. It reduces your lifespan.
Yeah, it reduces your lifespan. So
I want to talk about solutions, ways to combat this, community-oriented ones, perhaps. What are some of the ways where folks are feeling lonely or they see folks in their community lonely that they can use to address this problem?
I love that you asked that, because the powerful thing about this effort is that we have agency. This is not something we need the federal government or someone else to tell us how to solve. It's as simple as taking actions to check on people you care about. We have a bumper sticker here that says, call your grandma. Right? I mean, call your grandma.
I wish I had more before she went, But yes, if for anyone listening right now whose grandparents are still with us, call them.
Take it as a metaphor, right? What we can do is something we've heard people doing. In my organization, we had a task force working on this. And after a year of working on it, they all reported that they took that extra step to check on a neighbor, to call a friend. When someone came home from the hospital after surgery, they checked on them. They brought them lasagna. I mean, really, things that we know are good to do. But if you know that loneliness is bad for your health, you can do it. And organizations can take steps to talk about it in their newsletters, to do what they already do. And to be clear, many organizations already do work, right, that bring people together, but to do it with intentionality, because intention matters. So gathering, talking, communicating, sharing, all the interwoven goodness of human culture that can happen is really what we need.
Well, Brian Windrope is the Executive Director at Senior Services for South Sound in Thurston County, Washington. Brian, next time I'm feeling low, I'm going to give you a call, and I'm going to expect a lasagna, I got to say. That sounds pretty tasty.
I'll do it, David. Take care.
Thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Coming up next is lasagna, brought over by friends, the best-known cure for loneliness. Actually, we're not going to do that coming up next, but wouldn't that be a good topic? Oh, man. It's the moment you've been waiting for. We are about to have a pet psychic on. And if you're a skeptic like me, put on your skeptic hats. This should be fun and interesting. And we'll see if we believe in pet psychics by the end of it. That coming up after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The last show with David Cooper, where we apply quantum mechanical psychoanalytical astrotherapy to your problems.
Some people say they can talk to the dead. Some people say they can talk to spirits. But my guest today, she talks to pets. Long past pets. You heard that right. We are joined by J. Morgan Saifer, a professional animal communicator and psychic medium, to discuss our pets' past and communicating with them and their thoughts and their feelings, and I assume their strong feelings about the food you gave them. Morgan, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate the opportunity.
I gotta admit, I'm a bit of a skeptic, but generally quite curious. How does one first discover that they can communicate to pets that have passed?
Well, so just to clarify, I also communicate with living pets.
Fair enough.
And to clarify further, I like to call them animals because the word pet to me implies subordination, and I strongly feel that animals and people are equal.
You know what? I think that too. And sometimes I look at my cat that I've locked in my house and I'm like, I love you and you love me, but you're kind of my prisoner. I don't know how, I don't know how ethical this is.
Well, they definitely incarnate with the idea and the knowledge that they are support animals, essentially. So they incarnate with the knowledge that they're going to have to be at some point a prisoner one way or another, and they don't have necessarily as much active free will as they'd like. But to answer your question, I suppose when I first adopted, so I always grew up with animals my whole entire life, and then when I moved out on my own, I adopted my first cat, and I very quickly, that same day, took her home and realized that I was able to really just understand her thoughts and feelings. And I thought it was exclusive to her because I thought it was just, she and I had this really amazing connection. And then I proceeded to get a job in an animal shelter. And sure enough, I could hear all the animals and understand what they were thinking and feeling. And
what are they thinking and feeling? Because I'm like, you're not that bright, Mr. Cat. My cat's name is Tomato. Like, he'll go to areas that he falls off and hurts himself. He thinks he has better balance than he does. I love him, but he's not a brilliant animal. What are pets mostly thinking?
Well, okay. So, every animal is different, right? So it's like if I was to ask 50 humans, what do you think of tuna fish? Then they would, give you all sorts of different answers, right? They may say, yes, I like it, or no, not. But they would then proceed to say, well, I like this about it, or I don't like this. So, essentially, I like to tell people every animal is individual. Most animals, I would say, are... it depends, right? Like if the animal's been just with you for their whole life, then they will pretty much only care about what you are thinking and feeling. Their primary objective in life as an animal in your household is to make sure that you are healthy and happy, and that you're emotionally balanced, and that you're mentally balanced, and that, you are the best version of yourself that you can be. Now, aside from that, of course, we have the basic like hunger and, where do I go to the bathroom? When is my next meal? Like the typical, mammal stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, animals really are mostly concerned with what their people are thinking and feeling.
Morgan, I gotta say, it just sounds like you're more empathic than most. There's nothing mystic here, nothing out of the ordinary. It seems like you just have a good sense of what animals are thinking, and I'm with you. We're together right now.
Excellent. I love that.
Where you might lose me, but I am deeply curious about it, is how do we go from realizing you can communicate to animals? I assume you help people communicate with their pets and stuff.
Yes.
It's not just speaking to ones that have passed. How do we go from there to pets that are gone?
Well, essentially, when you look at it kind of, I'm going to use the word scientifically. However, I'm almost afraid to use it because I don't know the exact scientific explanation. But every individual living being has a frequency, right? So, and I shouldn't say living being. Every being in the universe has a frequency. So when you're able to tap into a frequency, whether it's a person or an animal or a tree or a person who's passed or an animal who's passed, it tapping into each individual frequency allows me to really connect with that individual energy and be able to relay messages about, what's going on with that particular consciousness.
Okay, you kind of lost me, but let's talk about what happens. Like, let's say I come to you and Tomato's going to live forever because if he ever passes, my girlfriend is going to need probably a year of grieving. She loves that pet more than me, and I don't even care because she loves that pet so much.
A healthy relationship.
It is a healthy relationship. It's extremely healthy because if she loved me as much as she loved that cat, I would be worried for my safety.
I would say so.
But imagine people like us come to you. We want to kind of like communicate or visit or whatever the motive is with our pet that's passed. What would a session look like?
Well, so essentially, I do virtual and in-person sessions. I travel often, so I'm not always in the city where my clients are. So assuming I go to your house, I would just
take a few minutes, connect with the animal. And, I also would need to connect with you two because a lot of what the animal tells me is predicated on what you two are thinking and feeling. So I like to kind of get an objective view, objective view of what everybody in your household is going through. Now, that said, I absolutely unequivocally prefer to not have any information about the animal or people whom I'm visiting before the session. Because if you email me and you say, oh, my cat's experiencing A, B, and C problems, that's already biasing my experience with your cat, right? Because then that's your experience with your cat, but it's not your cat's experience. So if I go in there thinking that your cat's a jerk, and I come into your house and your cat's just really upset with you, but isn't a jerk, but is reacting to something, that it's biasing my findings. So I always tell people, please don't tell me anything about what's going on. And then, of course, I say, is it a medical? You go see your veterinarian before you come and see me because I'm not a doctor and I can't diagnose, blah, blah, blah. So then I go into your house and I connect with you. I connect with your animal. And, depending on the situation and depending on the length of time I have, I'll ask the animal, I'll say I'm open to receiving any messages you have to share. And, how do you like your people? How do you like their food? If you could, improve on anything, what can your people do? And so these types of things. Now, if it's a specific issue, if the animal's peeing on the furniture and you don't know why, then I'll ask the animal, hey, what's going on? And, more often than not, I would say actually beyond that, 100% of the time, the animal is not being a jerk just out of the blue. They're trying to communicate something with you. And if you're not receptive to what they're communicating, they're going to try harder and harder to get your attention, right? So at which point people get frustrated and they're like, I really don't want to rehome my animal, blah, blah, blah. And most of the time, there's no need to rehome. So, and I come in and I sort of liaise and I kind of mediate between the animal and person or people and go from there. Yeah.
Do you communicate with pets who have passed away, or am I misunderstanding here?
I do, yes.
I have a story there because I have a friend who's kind of like me, doesn't really believe in this stuff. But when she lost her cat, she was so upset that she went and saw a psychic to communicate with her dead cat. Mm-hmm. And she went to the session with an open mind, and she left the session not really believing that she had communicated with her dead cat, but feeling amazing, like she had done something to take care of herself and had a nice experience to kind of celebrate that connection. So I actually think what you do, regardless of what people believe, is helpful. What would a session be like if someone had lost a pet?
Well, okay. So usually people will try and contact me the day after they've lost the animal. And I say, it's really good to give your animal a little bit of time to get used to the other side, right? So usually I ask people to give at the very least about a week or two before they contact me. And what I'll also do is, again, not ask for any leading information. So the way for anyone who's listening, if you want to really understand it and know that the medium is a true medium, they will offer you immediately a piece of information that you have not told them and that there's no possible way that anyone else could have told them. So for me, if somebody says oh, my cat or dog passed away and I'm really upset, and then I'll say, don't give me any more information. And then I call them or I see them in person, I'll start describing how the animal passed, or I'll start describing, an illness that the animal had towards the end of their life. And that's just confirmation to them that I'm actually connected with their animal.
And what sorts of things do animals tell their owners after they've passed?
Just a lot of confirmation, don't worry about me. Primarily when animals pass, they want to just make sure, because they're the support for their person in life. So they want to make sure that once they've passed, that that their person will be okay, right? So it's don't worry about me, I'll be fine. And primarily the animal just is very concerned about whether that person is going to be okay or not.
It's a nice message about closure, It's a nice way to feel like you've experienced that last moment and that your pet's okay, even though they're not with you.
Right.
Morgan, thank you for coming here.
Absolutely my pleasure, David. Thank you so much.
This was a nice chat. You can find J. Morgan Saifer at solsticespirit.com. She's a professional animal communicator and psychic medium. That's the show. Thanks for tuning into it. Now that it's over, you can still call, leave a voicemail, give us some feedback. You like the show? You hate it? I'll play the voicemail on air anyway. The number is 1-888-505-6644. That's 1-888-505-6644. Weird voicemails appreciated. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show. We'll be back tomorrow night with another show that's the last show. Well, it won't be the first show.